Describe a nonpolar covalent bond. Okay, so let me just write out the definition for covalent bonds in general. A covalent bond is between two nonmetals and it also involves the sharing of electrons. Okay, so now that we know this, there are two main types of covalent bonds. The first, which I'll answer in the question, is the nonpolar covalent bond. So when you have a nonpolar covalent bonds, this is when the two atoms have an equal or similar electronegativity values. So I'm also going to pull up the electronegativity chart. So over here are all the different elements and all of their corresponding electronegativity values. So for example, nonpolar bonds are between atoms that are the same element, so like nitrogen and nitrogen. Obviously, they have the same electronegativity, so this is an example of a nonpolar bond. But also, let's look at the carbon and hydrogen bond. We can calculate their difference in electronegativity just by using this chart on the left. So the electronegativity of carbon is 2.5, and the electronegativity of hydrogen is 2.1. So therefore, they only have an electronegativity difference of 0.4. So there's a rule of thumb when you want to double check whether or not a bond is nonpolar or polar. Basically, when the difference in electronegativity is from 0 to 0.5, this means that you have a nonpolar bond. So let me write out the opposite of nonpolar. The second main covalent bond is just polar covalent. And as you can guess, this is when two atoms have dissimilar electronegativity values. Dissimilar electronegativity values. Then this leads to a dipole moment. And its electronegativity difference range is around like 0.51, so like I guess above that, to around 1.69. So let's write out the example of water. So the water molecule is a polar molecule, and the bond between oxygen and hydrogen is also polar as well. So we can also calculate the difference in electronegativity for oxygen and hydrogen. So let's look at the chart on the left. The electronegativity of oxygen is 3.5, and the electronegativity of hydrogen is 2.1. So this gives us a difference of 1.4. And you can see that it fits in the range of the polar covalent bonds. But on a different note, we can also just quickly look at what an ionic bond is. So ionic bonds are between a metal and a nonmetal. So every time you see a metal involved in a bond, you already know that it is ionic. So an example of this would be like potassium bonded with fluorine. And basically the difference in electronegativity for ionic bonds are typically when they're greater than 1.7. So let's look at potassium and fluorine. The electronegativity of Kf. Potassium has an electronegativity value of, where is potassium on here? Okay, yeah, 0.8, and fluorine's is 4.0. So I'm going to do 4.0 minus 0.8, which is very high, 3.2. So since this difference is very large, we already know that this is an ionic bond. Okay, so let's see what our junior tutor said. A covalent bond is a chemical bond formed from the sharing of electrons between two atoms. This bond is formed between two nonmetals. A nonpolar covalent bond is a type of covalent bond formed when the two atoms have equal electronegativities and thus have equal sharing of bonding electrons. Examples of compounds with nonpolar covalent bonds are diatomic molecules such as H2, Cl2, and O2. Yep, so this is correct.